Hi, everybody. I'm Stu Hirst. Thank you to the Future of Cybersecurity for having me to speak again at this fantastic event. It's a brilliant lineup, actually, as they always are. So delighted to be here with you, hopefully for the last time virtually, as we try to get back to some in-person events, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to. So look, this is a talk about my my journey from entering InfoSec about 10 years ago now to where I find myself today. And it's a bit of a warts and all story, hopefully with plenty of advice along the way. Hopefully it's good advice. And I hope you find it useful. It's been a bit of a different talk to what I might normally give. So some disclaimers for those who've heard me speak before. You'll know that I like memes. For those who haven't heard me speak before, well, I like memes. This 10-year journey I'll describe has had plenty of ups and downs, and I've learned a huge amount, really. But I'm by no means an expert. Or I don't believe I am. I've just learned some things along the way. So I've been lucky enough to work at these incredible organizations, but it hasn't all been plain sailing, and there's been as much failure as success, frankly. I'm going to describe a bit about how I ended up at these places, what drove those decisions, and what I've learned. I feel proud actually to be associated in some small way with the journeys of these companies, even the ones that didn't work out. So I joined Trustpilot, the online review platform, in early March this year as their CISO. We're a free and open platform to every company and consumer around the globe. So sharing your experiences helps others make better choices, and companies kind of up their game. So very, very delighted to be here. We're headquartered in Copenhagen, but we also have offices and locations in London, New York, Denver, Vilnius, Berlin, Melbourne, and also here in Edinburgh, where I live. We IPO'd in March, became a public company, and I find myself in a tremendous role where security plays a huge part in the trust of our platform and products. In fact, it's pretty much the ideal place to drive security forward. I work with incredible people here, trying to make the internet a more trusted place to shop, and as I say, I'm super proud to be here. I mean, technically speaking, this is my first CISO role, though I've been in cyber leadership for a number of years. So the talk outline, hopefully I can offer some insights into what's worked for me and what hasn't really, and how I've learned to adapt. It's my personal journey, so I can't promise what I say will work for everyone, but I hope it's enjoyable and informative. And one of the reasons I love public speaking is that even if this helps one person in some way, it's really been worth doing. So again, thank you for having me. So one of the questions I get asked the most, as I'm sure many of you in InfoSec do, is how did you get into InfoSec? This question comes up a lot. And everyone has a subtly different way into the industry, and mine was no different to many, in that it happened partly by chance, but partly as a result of some life choices, which I'll explain. So I left school at 17 after my hires in Scotland. I have no degree, and the only computer-based experience I had was a certificate in Pascal programming and playing the Amiga. And that was about all I had as a 17-year-old. I applied for 2 jobs just as I was ready to leave school. One was a fingerprint officer with the police, and one was with RBS as a trainee developer. Life, I guess, could have been very different if I'd joined the police. I was then to spend about 12 years coding COBOL, which you'll see on the screen there, exceptionally badly. And anyone who worked with me during those years will testify to how bad, I guess, I was at it all. But frankly, there was a reason for that, and it was simply this. Back then, I cared more for weekends than weekdays. I'd begun DJing at 16, and by 18, I was performing in clubs and spending my weekends partying. I moved to London in 2006, and I had the best years of my life, really, traveling around the UK and Europe at events. Music was and still is my life, my passion. I'd been touring making records and running record labels until around the time of the financial crash, I think. I was offered redundancy with RBS, and frankly couldn't have signed up quickly enough from what I remember. Decided to pursue music full time, sound engineering for others, and DJing at the weekends. I guess it wasn't the best time to depart a well-paid job for the unknown, but that's the choice I made. I've asked myself whether I'd make that choice again despite what happened, and my answer is always yes. My choices then shaped my choices now, and life's a learning curve of events, mistakes, and fun. One thing that never really crossed my mind was that I would fail particularly. It might have been youthful naivety or blind faith, but I thought I'd made the leap into a new and exciting career, one I'd always dreamed of, actually. So I spent 10 months or so continuing to try to eke out a living making music, and it was really, really bloody hard. I was disciplined. I worked a 9 to 5, but I also probably burned the candle at both ends to an extent. I was single, money in the bank, in one of the greatest cities in the world, frankly. So I certainly enjoyed myself. As that year was coming to an end, I just wasn't bringing in the money I needed to survive. I realized in a few months I wouldn't have enough to pay my rent. Not ideal. I didn't panic, but I did realize it sort of hadn't worked out. And also the industry wasn't quite what I expected it to be, really, full of shysters and con men. And I signed record deals and never saw a penny from the sales. I traveled to countries to DJ and not get paid. It was costing me money to remain in the industry. But all in all, I had a bloody good time, and I have some stories to tell because of it. I mean, wow, what an experience! What a set of life experiences, as the hipster cow might allude to there. You know, if I told you I probably ate through about £40,000 of redundancy money in savings, you might assume that was wasted money, but I'd do it all over again in a shop. It was the most tremendous life experience, and I think those kind of things set me up for what I perhaps do in my career these days. So what does all this mean? What can I offer you in terms of advice about that experience? Well, I mean, my approach was and still is really to take calculated risks. I like change. I like the unknown. It's why I've moved around a lot physically in my life, and also why I've thrown myself into the deep end of jobs. This might not be for everyone, but I've always thought life was a set of experiences that you can shape. You can be as boring or as exciting as you wish to be, depending on what works for you. And for me, risk equals reward generally, not exclusively, but I see even bad experiences as really important. Now, in trying to get back into employment, I didn't have a plan. I guess I needed to be able to pay my rent. So I spent 4 months applying for and interviewing for jobs. Some of those interviews were excruciating, frankly. My lack of knowledge was absolutely apparent. I applied for over 100 jobs in the end. It became a full-time job to apply for a job. One of those was with the Train Line, which was a company that I'd long admired, and the job specs stood out immediately. I actually heard nothing from my first application, so applied via another mechanism. Nothing, not even a response. But the job spec and company had really jumped out so massively as being the one I wanted that I couldn't really let rejection lie on that one. I mentioned it on Facebook, and such as luck would have it, the sister-in-law of a friend worked there. So we got in touch, and she referred me for the role. 2 interviews later, and I got the job. I literally high-fived the mirror in the lift on the way down from the last interview, because I knew I had it, and I knew it was my route back in. So I guess the moral of that little story, or this part of the story, is graft and perseverance. If you want something bad, really go after it. I mean, don't give up after rejections. Go again, dust yourself off, hold your head up high, and on to the next thing. And explore other avenues if you don't hear back from companies. Find the hiring manager on LinkedIn, for example, or find people already in the role. Use Twitter, Facebook to make contacts, whatever works, really. I suppose the word really here is hustle. Nothing comes particularly easy. be under no illusion, some of those interviews were actually soul destroying. I was running out of money, and it's not as if opportunities were falling into my lap. So I joined the awesome train line back in 2011, it would have been. But I still wasn't actually in security, and I still wasn't brilliantly settled into the work that enthused me. But it was a great group of people, and I loved the tech industry and the pace and the culture and the environment. Then came the luck part, and I wonder how many other existing security pros listening today can put their entry into the field down to chance in the way that I have. A fantastic boss of mine, who knows who he is, asked me if I'd like to take on PCI DSS for the company as the security person was leaving. Now, I don't know if that manager saw something in me or simply needed a quick fix to a problem, but I agreed pretty quickly. And it was the start of this bonkers 10 years journey. So my advice here is perhaps you're not quite in the role you want to be in. You know, you may be looking for something else within security, or you're not quite in security already. Is there a team you could move to internally? Do you have a secondment scheme? Explore internal options for getting into security if you're not quite where you want to be. Now, PCI actually taught me a lot about security controls, although I do mock it a little. It really got me my foot in the door. And I also learned about work ethic. And I felt I'd found something that I really liked and could interest me. I was sent on my first security course around that time, within the first few months. And it was actually a CompTIA Security Plus course, and I found that incredibly useful. I'd simply never experienced a number of key areas within my jobs previously, like access control or cryptography. Those courses are now online on many platforms, and I still do numerous courses a year, even if I don't complete certifications within them. I know the certification side of things splits the industry in terms of value add sometimes, but the course material itself will almost always teach you something. So after nearly 3 years at Trainline, I eventually moved on to Skyscanner. Now, during that 6 months, actually, when I was coming towards the end of that role, I was at the final interview after months of interviewing for a job at MI5, which only my wife knew about, despite my friends having to be vetted covertly. But the Skyscanner job was advertised, and it was back in my hometown of Edinburgh, and I went through a week of interviews before being offered the job. Not only was the company amazing, there were important sort of family decisions as well. That always plays a part in these things. I remember my mum crying actually when I told her I was coming home, which was kind of nice. It's weird in these moments, the things you remember. As soon as I came off the call to accept the job, I immediately thought of a line from a song by the War on Drugs, an indie band, which says, "I'm in my finest moment. Can I be more than just a fool?" And the whole thing felt kind of life-changing, and it was, frankly. But again, it was a risk, as I've mentioned before. Moving country with my wife, who gave up her career as well at that time. Now, one thing I did leverage during that time were sites like Glassdoor. Skyscanner was also in the top 5 companies to work for. It was quite easy back then to see how companies were rated. It's not always a guarantee of a good time, but now you can do a lot of recon on companies before you decide to apply or join. So my Skyscanner near 3 years were incredible, actually. I learned about all these amazing areas of tech, and culturally it was tremendous, like a family. It's the first time I'd listened to talk from our then chief operating officer, which literally made the hairs on my arms stand up. I've never felt that before, and I think then I knew I'd truly found the industry I wanted to work in. But I look back and realize that I didn't particularly know that much about security. I bumbled through some aspects of SecOps and cloud without as much understanding as I needed. But I also learned that I could learn those things. So don't feel too overwhelmed if you feel you don't know enough, because none of us do. I'd gone from pushing one line of code about once a month to code going into prod hundreds of times a day. I was given the space to develop at my own pace, despite the high achieving aspect of the company. I remember a former boss of mine saying just a few months in, "Let's get you managing people." She had real trust in me even early on, and I hugely respect that. It gave me confidence and helped me battle the imposter syndrome I've talked about in other talks, including at this event. Now, one of my struggles in that role at that time was I didn't really know how to strategize in such a mad environment, this whole squads and tribes model with such agility and pace. And I started researching other similar models, and I ended up stumbling across Etsy and their security engineering team. Now, their CISO Zane, who I talk about quite a lot, was giving talks which are on YouTube, and it was a bit of a eureka moment. Oops, sorry, a bit of a eureka moment. So his team had been fixing all these problems I needed to fix. He even kindly spent an hour with me on a call talking about it all one-to-one, and I really, really appreciate that. And that, you know, there's numerous people in my career that have given me that time at these stages, and I value it hugely. So for anyone who doesn't quite know perhaps what to do next, then reach out to people who've done it before. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, and I love nothing better than helping others in the industry as best I can. There's so many great events and talks we can learn and share so much. So even as you progress into those more senior roles and feel a little isolated, go and speak to people who've already done it. So towards the end of my third year at Skyscanner, I made the really difficult decision to see if I could progress somewhere else, but it doesn't always work out. Around this time, we'd had our first child. My wife had quit her career, and we bought our first house. So it wasn't really the easiest time to think about moving on from a great job. But I talked earlier about calculated risks, right? That's what I've always done. So that's what I did here. I joined a marvelous Capital One team where I got to see cybersecurity at huge scale, a big UK team, and an even bigger one in the States. And I also wanted to see how a huge bank was nearly cloud first. It was a really whirlwind near year of traveling and working with the leadership team, and I've actually got nothing but good things to say about them. It just wasn't quite the pace that I was used to. So after that, I joined Photobox, which again was a huge learning curve, but this one for the wrong reasons. I particularly failed in this role in a number of ways. Again, an excellent company, but much of what I tried didn't work. And it was a tricky environment for me to thrive in. I tried to replicate some work I'd done previously, not appreciating it was a totally different environment. Areas, for example, such as bug bounty, which I'd had previous quite big successes in, gave me spectacular failures. So it was the entire opposite. Moving into leadership roles meant I was just seeing other parts to the day job, clashing personalities and some of the difficult parts of strategizing across big companies. So that definitely wasn't an easy year, and also combined with my wife fell pregnant with our second child during that. So one thing I would mention here around kind of advice and learnings on this aspect was I almost certainly suffered burnout to an extent, and I've talked about this at some other events. Too much traveling, too much time away from my family, stressful work, and a limited amount of downtime. Lots of living in and out of hotels and moving up and down the country. It can actually be quite difficult to spot the signs when this is happening, and perhaps this is a talk all of its own. But self-care is really important, especially in security roles, which can be kind of crazy, as we know. You might find, like I did, that I couldn't even really talk to my family about aspects of work because they don't understand it. They don't understand what I do. And thankfully, during that time, I'd spent some nights with some very trusted industry colleagues who were awesome and offered some great advice. And I value that I've been able to build those trusted friendships in my day job. So eventually I realized I had to move on. Best for everyone involved to go and search for something else. And I truly tried with lots going on behind the scenes, but it had been failure really in almost every way, actually, which was rather frightening. And I questioned whether perhaps I could exist at that level. But again, I was rather single-minded in my desire to improve, and reached out to a brilliant industry colleague at Just Eat, who might just be speaking at this event, actually. And I simply asked if he was looking for anyone. A little bit bolshy, a few messages on LinkedIn. And it turned out he was going to be recruiting later in the year, but he ended up bringing forward some interviews given my interest in it, and it all worked out. So the crux of this really is you just never know what might be going on at companies. It does no harm to reach out to people and ask if they need people. You might pique some interest early. I go back to that word again, but it's about hustle. So I spent nearly 2 years at the wonderful Just Eat and had a blast. Some of the happiest times of my career, actually. Wonderful team and people, and we did some great work. But again, when I least expected it, an opportunity came along to progress again. For me, really, change is constant, and I accepted that a long time ago. Now, during the interview process for my current role, I did something I've never done before, and I actually sent a pre-read to one of the leadership team before I was interviewed by them. I'd spent a lot of time researching the company, and I compiled a list of what I thought their InfoSec risks were. I broke down what I thought an ideal team structure would look like. I gave an outline of what year 1 and year 2 and 3 would look like in terms of areas of focus, which included rough estimates of headcount needed. I also broke down some of the attached costs for people and the tech. And then probably the most important slide, which was my perception of the pain involved in driving all of this forward. That included things such as understanding that major incidents are likely to happen, that salaries are rising faster than other areas of tech, that CloudSec is niche and difficult to recruit for, that culture change takes time and investment, etc. So in hindsight, it was really powerful, and I felt like I'd had a loose plan before I'd even got anywhere near being offered the job. Of course, everyone has different interview experiences. I don't think there's a particularly right or wrong way to go about interviewing, but I've always stuck to the mantra that tech can be taught. You're really looking for a mixture of company and team fit and certain experience. So as you move into more senior positions, it might be natural that you're interviewed by more people. But I think overall, honesty wins the day. Be honest as a candidate. Don't pretend to do things you can't do. Don't make up experience. And then for interviewers, stop looking for perfect candidates. You're searching for someone who stands the best chance of succeeding. And then who's seen job adverts like this before? Sadly, a bit too often. I mean, we're better than this, aren't we? Really, not every role needs certs or all the skills. Some of these areas are very niche in themselves, let alone having experience across lots of them. So let's look to be a little bit more realistic. It's also worth checking out some of the industry salary benchmarking so that you're attracting talent at the right levels. I've seen some drastically low salaries for very senior jobs. Good security experience is often expensive. So my advice from this section, do you ever really truly feel ready to make the next steps? There's always kind of hesitancy and nervousness, and gut feel sometimes plays a part in it. I've tended to make the leap before I feel ready. Again, might not work for everybody, but that's been my journey. So lifelong learning, public speaking, and bravery. As I mentioned earlier, with regards to watching talks, I spend a lot of time researching other companies as best I can, especially in the tech world, their engineering blogs, their open source tools. I mean, whatever I can get my hands on, really. I see security as a non-stop learning endeavor. It's actually often quite hard to keep up with, to be honest. But that's what makes it incredibly exciting to work in. So yeah, research. And then I started talking publicly about 6 years ago or so. Now, Future of Cybersecurity was actually the first one I ever spoke at. So a big thanks for that, and for sort of sticking by me and having me back to do some talks. It gave me just that opportunity to share similar learnings that I had watched on those talks back in my Skyscanner days. It's sort of part petrifying, part exhilarating. I do miss them in person, actually, so let's hope that's soon. It actually takes me a long time to put talks together. This one's taken hours and hours of work during lunch hours to put together. So I guess when you see people speak at events, given your support, it's a brave thing to do, and it's often a huge effort, not to mention daunting. Now, I've always been a big user of LinkedIn and Twitter to share opinions, thoughts, learnings. Twitter in particular is becoming a rather toxic, divisive platform where people don't seem to be able to disagree without it descending into name calling or bullying. And I truly hate that it's become that in a small way. If people aren't brave enough to challenge groupthink, which is very prevalent at the moment, and especially in this bonkers industry, how will anything move forward? We disrupt by challenging the norm, and we need to continue to do so without fear. So my advice here, as best you can, is be brave, right? Put yourself out there if you feel comfortable doing so, because without the vocal ones, and it's okay not to be, by the way, we just might stagnate. Community. I run Cyber Scotland Connect with Harry McLaren and a great group of moderators up here in Scotland, and it was born out of some initial meetups, and now we're trying to bring lots of groups of people together as a sort of ecosystem. Now, COVID has kind of derailed our plans somewhat, as with everybody, but we've partnered with major events and ran workshops and had virtual sessions, and the overarching idea of community is massive in security, and for me, I think we can all learn or lean on one another, and make connections. When anyone asks me how they can get into InfoSec or progress further, I always tell them to attend events, obviously as best we can under current circumstances. You can meet all sorts of people and discover opportunity, or get active on Twitter, Discord, Telegram, whatever the cool kids are using these days. And I also think it's really important to give back to the industry, which has fundamentally been very good to me. Now, in this talk, I've given lots of advice that has worked for me, and I appreciate perhaps only some of it will resonate, and then that's okay. But also sometimes people give bad advice. Two beauties for me have been you need to be more technical, and you need to be able to code. The irony was that I thought I was both technical and able to code, given my my background. But let me tell you, you can make a great career for yourself in this industry without being massively technical or being able to code. Sure, both absolutely help, but there are still roles you can excel in. So whilst advice is there to be given, it's also there to be ignored and not dwelled upon. Great leaders will foster an environment that you can thrive in and help you learn, not put you down or focus overly on negatives. We're all on a journey. So look, huge thank you for having me talk again at this event, and for listening in. I hope this has been valuable. Just gonna wrap up a little bit here. So for me, these are the things that have worked, and the advice that I've hopefully taken on. That take calculated risks if that works for you. Utilize other people in the industry who've been there, got the t-shirt, and are willing to share that with you. Appreciate that not every career move will work out. You'll make mistakes, as I have, I'm sure, but you'll learn from those. Yeah, beware that burnout, and look after yourselves. Don't wait for the dream job to land on your lap. Do some hustling. Maybe take that leap before you're ready, because you just never know. Immerse yourself in community and opportunity. And this one, really be yourself. That's what I am. What you see is what you get, and I stand by that. I'm not somebody different at work than I am at home or with my friends. That's super important to me, and I think that really works. So huge thank you for having me. As I said, I can't wait to get back in person to events. I'm sure that's not too far away. Thank you again to the organisers, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the talks. Thank you very much.